Hey guys, we're sitting down with acclaimed map designer Sikey to team up with him and play through his new Pincer Lane 2. Pincer Lane 2 is an incredibly long map. I mean, look at this thing. I had to cut it in half just to fit it on the screen. But it's not just a long map, it's a brilliant map. The middle players, who are opposed to each other, are constantly deciding whether or not to dedicate all their resources to the fight or send units backwards to defend their very vulnerable stronghold and cities, while the side lane players have to decide whether to fight on the left, the right, or try to harass their allies' opponent by sending troops right to the center. All the crazy decision-making and fun make this a great map for beginners and pros alike. Hey, Sikey.
Hey guys, I made Pincer Lane, and this is its second iteration, much improved from the first, which I made 5 months ago and then haven't touched since. I just decided to randomly throw the code and host a match for it. Pretty recently, I decided that it was well overdue time to make a second version of it that is much, much better and much more balanced.
I'd say you definitely did a good job. Pincer Lane 2 has all the fun of the previous map, but this had some serious high-level design put in. All the forests, all the barracks positionings, everything about this map lends itself to weaken overpowered strategies, but still make some creative things possible. I can't even scroll through this whole thing and go over every little bit of it, but it's brilliant. Let's try to cover as much as we can, Sikey. So tell us about the different fronts and the push and pull of the map.
Basically, the entire map's design is based on this whole push and pull between where you want to dedicate your resources. You all always have a clear main front, right? So in this case, for the center, very obviously, it will be the green or cyan player, actually in this case, against black. And then on the edges, you will have the other two players, which is purple and orange in this case, here, fighting each other on a more main front, where you can kind of see that they're racks, like barracks, relatively close to each other, objectives and villages to capture and contest there. That's where your main fighting goes on. But now, when you have the strongholds, well, strongholds are obviously victory conditions. So it becomes pretty paramount to defend them. You can't obviously just leave them alone or you lose. So there is going to be a lot of harassment that you will basically do as the edge players towards the center in order to try and divert some of the resources from center for them to actually contest their main front. So it's all going to be about when picking and choosing when and where to help out basically the other side indirectly by sending forces the other way.
So let's talk about that opening Vlad just did. He moved his commander down and captured the immediate village on the side lane. Is that the opening you as the creator would recommend on this stage?
Well, while that does seem like the obvious opener because your commander can't capture anything else like turn one, it actually delays your ability to capture the barracks because there is a different, and as well there's a different path that you can take to contest the more forward villages, which you will be inevitably fighting over with the other player. Typically, I do not like this opening. I've designed the amount of tiles and movements you can take here that you are quite incentivized to move your commander towards center to capture either the two more forward villages, and then build a warlock turn one, which actually can capture that same village that you took turn one here, and then subsequently capture the barracks below it. Because right now, this will be quite a bit slower and quite a bit more inefficient. There is still other options you can do here if you want to take this village turn one, because it's still about, costs and benefits here. It's not entirely a superior strategy. You can even still build a warlock turn one and capture that village to the left of Orange's barracks there as well, if you want more income early on, because income, of course, here will help you on both fronts.
Now, speaking of both fronts, it looks like he went for a very aggressive strategy. He made two skeletons that are charging at your stronghold instead of coming to bother me. Additionally, to make up for that loss of early barracks, he straight built a wagon here to bring himself down. So one thing I love about this stage is there's definitely a lot of different strategies you can use. Alright, it's my turn. I feel like I want to respond to that aggression. If he's going to build a wagon, and I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to stop him in time, I'm going to move my infantry to take these cities that he abandoned. But I'm also going to start bringing swordsmen against my opponent's base, so that I can harass him as well and take the pressure off you. As for that alchemist strategy, I think I have just enough money to try it, so I'm going to move my commander forward for that early aggression, and then build that alchemist or warlock to take this city on the next turn.
Yeah, I always get like the terms a little mixed up. I always forget that you just want to call them mages in general because they're called different things for each faction. Something I kind of forget from time to time.
Oh, same here. I always default to the Cherrystone faction. Are you going to respond to those infantry marching against your stronghold, or do you not need to do that yet?
I definitely don't quite feel that threatened because it's going to take them quite a while. Infantry also don't threaten villages particularly well because they take a huge amount of retaliation damage. Also, one thing to note about Wargroove villages is that their damage does not scale with their health. They always do the same amount of damage whether they're at 1 health or 10 health. So like soldiers typically get destroyed by this because you kind of expect to hit them once, trade, and then, all right, now we're both weakened, so we'll both do less damage, and that's okay. But no, actually the village will just kill the soldier on the next time it tries to attack it. So yeah, right now I'm not feeling very threatened by that. So I feel like I still want to commit more to center and taking control here.
That makes sense. So what strategy are you using for the center? I see a lot of mages and some spears.
Yeah, I'm using a newer strategy as well, which is kind of also centric and to Emmerich specifically, because Emmerich, of course, synergizes with mages with his crystal, which allows his mages to crit on any sort of terrain underneath the crystal, because it's all to do with the defense value of where mages get their crits. For those of you who don't already know, I'm sure most people who will be the audience of this video will be familiar with all of Wargroove's mechanics. But this time around, I also wanted to just try this mage opener because I get to capture 4 villages more quickly. Especially with going first here, I believe that I can kind of take center more efficiently right now and really abuse that position. Yeah, that's my thought process behind trying this opener. I haven't played with it before, so it's just something I'm experimenting with right now.
Well, it looks like a good strategy. I will say, though, just based on the codex, infantry do about 40% to any given structure, meaning if he can get 3 skeletons onto the stronghold, that is technically a win condition, even with the plains bonus.
Yeah, for sure, but it's still going to take him a while. Perhaps he will choose to attack villages, capture villages on the way. Those forests really slow people down. And of course, in response, I can send a knight backwards to defend. So it's probably, if he starts moving straight towards me, that's probably the turn where I want to build the knight and respond. That's about the timing I imagine that it will work out for.
Awesome. There's definitely a lot of timing and strategy to consider in this map. I noticed that Black is making spears to send backwards to defend his stronghold. That's a very cheap but effective way of preventing my infantry from having any major effect. I think instead, what I'm going to do on my turn is probably just capture properties instead of harassing him too much early on. But since he's chosen to do that and detract those resources, it looks like you might, especially with that first turn and all the mages, have a good shot at mid.
Yeah, I definitely in general, though, it's kind of just my style that I try to play as tempo-oriented and abusive and aggressive as possible. But as well, that was another push factor that I already noticed that he built his pikemen behind his 3rd racks there. So I was like, yeah, he's going to try and defend his back. So I might as well just full send on middle, essentially, as much as I can and try and get away and skimp as much as I can on defense behind me.
Orange is going full aggression with the skeletons. I've never seen anyone do that on this stage before. And rather than put Volder in the wagon, he just moved him down and set up the wagon to move an alchemist. I've got to say, these are some cool strategies as well.
Yeah, it's definitely an opener I've never seen before. It's kind of interesting. Some people just like really like their own specific units. I'm sure that this man is a true man of culture, as we would know him in the Wargroove Discord, and true wagon aficionado. When this game came out, man, all the wagon memes in the subreddit, oh my goodness.
Definite improvement over the Advanced Wars APC, which was just kind of useless.
For sure. You're kind of just like built APCs, kind of forced to build them just because you needed resupply. That was easy to access, but other than that, APCs weren't great, especially on most maps. Inversely, we actually like probably have the other side to things now, that when you have too many roads on maps, wagons are almost too good now, just because of how fast they move.
All right, so Orange is clearly throwing most of his or her resources into the right side of the map, building alchemists, wagons. Orange is trying to take all this property here. They're going very aggressive. They don't want to lose to my 2 racks. On the left side, they're going full-on infantry to charge your stronghold and take properties along the way. You think it's time to respond, or are you still good for another turn?
Yeah, I believe it's now time to respond, considering just how committal they are right now. If I don't commit now, I probably will get overwhelmed in the long run. Fortunately, they still are only building skeletons because they're trying to build more expensive units on the right side, so a knight will handle that very handily. And the pikemen, if they build a pikeman now, it will be a little bit too slow to catch up with how much zoning my knight will be able to do. At least that's the thought process here. So we should be okay.
Although I know the answer to this, just for our more beginner viewers, could you tell me why you didn't capture this city, even though you moved your commander right next to it?
Yes. So this is like one of the most classic things that I actually tend to abuse people going second. People like to capture center properties, even though when both your commanders are starting to meet in the center. So when you capture this center property, your opponent's commander will be able to take it out immediately and be able to take position on this forest, which means it'll be pretty unfavorable for you to attack it from adjacent plains. So not only will they be able to kill the village, they will gain groove meter, because you gain a large amount of groove meter for killing a unit with a commander or structure. So that includes villages. And you will not gain any positional advantage whatsoever, because they will be able to move on to that forest basically for free as well, without being threatened.
So this is one of those rare cases where it's better not to capture the village.
Yeah. It's also like, it's a subtle first turn kind of balancing mechanic as well, because normally most maps you don't like to have center structures, or objectives rather, because the first player will always get to them first. But if you design your map in such a way where your commanders meet and you have terrain on either side of the structure, then it kind of creates this interesting standoff position where neither of you are very incentivized to capture the center property. So nobody is going to get that early income advantage. Now, the same can't be said for the bottom property, but of course, the player going second in this case started with an extra soldier turn 1 that they got to mobilize. So that is supposed to be the balancing factor here, even though I did get center first here by building an alchemist and running towards it.
Lots of good strategy. I see you made the knight to deal with the skellies.
Yeah, definitely going to be running that back to try and start to defend. It's going to be pretty much impossible, the way this map's set up, to defend the top village there that's closest to him. Because like the woods as well, my knight's basically not going to be able to hit anything that contests or attacks my top village. So that's basically free there for the side player, which is more or less one of the big incentives for the edge players on the edges of the map to begin harassing the center player's income.
That makes sense. I was very concerned about my opponent building expensive units on the right, and I guess that prevented me from going after that village. So that's one of the ways they balance out your first turn advantage, by making my opponent go before me. And then that detracts from what I can do, and in turn, I can't harass your opponent as much, and it comes full circle. I really like that about this map.
That was basically the thought. The initial thought of making this map was that first turn advantage is always a really difficult thing to balance around. And it was just like, what if I came up with a concept that made it so that first turn advantage was mitigated by the entire map's concept instead of just having to more artificially make first turn advantage counters, such as starting the second player with an extra skeleton, a little more income, a village already captured, a barracks already captured turn one. How to say, interested in trying this out, in trying to design a map around it? Yeah, it ended up being one of the very first few maps that I started to create.
You know I love this map. I remember the original version, it used to be possible to just build knights and fly them at the enemy stronghold to take it down. How do you use the terrain to mitigate that strategy?
Yeah, there's been a lot of work put into this terrain that I've set up here to balance out and get rid of kind of overpowering or dominant strategies that players used to go to in older iterations. So all this forest here really slows down the knights, because knights actually have their own movement category, which is, I guess, the horseshoe icon is what you'd see. So if you highlight a forest there, you realize that the terrain cost is 3. So with how it's set up, I counted the tiles, and basically it will slow down knights by at least an entire turn or 2, just due to them not being able to move over forests quickly. And as well as that, like the build distance from the villages to the barracks, I counted the tiles again. For example, the top village is 5 tiles away from where you can build the knight, which means the knights cannot crit that village on the first turn that they come out. So you'd have to reposition before getting a crit, or of course just attack it normally, which means you will not be able to one-shot that village. There's a lot of like small nuances there. Like if you look at the lower racks on the edge player sides, they can move 5 units towards the bottom village, which is neutral to begin with. But then they have to spend the tile to move onto the village tile and then onto the forest. So they're like really staggering their movement. You're not making full use of your knight's movement if you were building them to harass there. So it's really, yeah, a really subtle nerf to knights, that you get a lot less movement. You spend 5 moving to the village, then you have to spend 4 units just trying to get past the forest, and then you can only move another 2. It's very restrictive.
And I know from experience when I tried it before that works. Right, we definitely have different strategies developing. I'm going very aggressive on the left because my opponent chose to pour his resources into the right and early harassment. And as a result of that, I'm not harassing your opponent, though they did choose to send down the spears anyway. In fact, if they get enough spears, they might start coming for me.
Yeah, you might be right about that. Well, I'm definitely trying to keep the pressure up on them in the center, so that hopefully won't be a huge problem for you. Interestingly enough, they've decided to go very aggressive in the center despite them being down on material. So I'm going to try and abuse that as much as possible here. Try and take as much position as possible. As well, if their commander attacking, let's get some retaliation. And let's kill this soldier that decided to haphazardly capture this and allow my mage to crit. I guess the commander health is decently more relevant than killing the village. It's kind of a toss-up. I guess I want to protect my mage for that reason, though. So I guess I'm just kind of forced to attack his commander twice like this. Put him to 2. Can't be wrong, really.
I'm just wondering, could you have killed him with the alchemist?
Oh yeah, I probably could have. I did not calculate that. Like that's totally a huge mistake. Like I could have ended it right there, but hey, we get to play this map longer instead of having it end so prematurely. What is this, like turn 4? Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely could have killed him with the alchemist there. Like that's why you're not supposed to attack the commander like that, because you would have straight up lost the game there. But
I remember you just talked about that in the beginning. That's why you didn't capture that village.
Yeah, well, I didn't say that you would lose like instantly, but yeah, it's definitely ill-advised. So I could have scored a lethal there, but you know, fine. Let's have some fun. Let's play out this map.
Yeah,
see
I
where
want to
this
see
takes us.
Orange rewarded for all those really good plays. I'm really scared, like with this infantry pouring in, the wagon. I've never seen this before. Also, it looks like Orange has built pikemen to stop me now. So the harass should end with those infantry. But I noticed you built another infantry anyway to send backwards. You think you might maybe need to retake a city or something?
Yeah, that's pretty much the thought process there. Like, he's going to take at least the top city there. I just feel like it would be nicer to have another tool there, but I wanted something cheap because I want to send expensive units down the center. So just a normal soldier is the way to go, I feel. In turn, I can apply a little bit pressure right to his back as well, since we are kind of pincering him really hard there.
So I noticed that your opponent is building archers and pikemen, but you're still going mages and horses into it. What's your strategy here? Are they especially good with this terrain?
In general, I just like that they have such a large threat range. They're just going to control space really well. Actually, most fights in the center, his pikeman count is pretty low. So he's only controlling like the center space of where these two pikemen are. And he has to basically value them extremely highly or force him to build more pikemen because of the double knights. And right here, because he decided to attack my mage with that, I'm going to kill one of his pikemen, or at least severely cripple it. And so he'll be probably struggling to deal with these knights, I imagine. Also, knights, fast units, warlocks, mages, whatever you want to call them, generally just fast-moving units are going to give these archers a real tough time.
Yeah, I see what you mean about that property thing. Valder definitely used that property to get his groove quicker. Although, again, it is Valder.
Yeah. Valder's the number one case of like abusing people who capture center properties like that because he just gets his groove instantly if he gets a unit kill.
Well, I see that his infantry are going for your bases. They're harassed there.
Yep, for sure. Looks like he's going to be able to take out two of my villages pretty cleanly. He's going to take the top one out this turn, with, assuming he attacks with that. Yep, and he will. And then he'll be taking out the lower one rather shortly, unless my knight manages to get there to intercept. Yeah, speaking of the two racks on the edges, though, that was definitely one of the bigger oversights on the first iteration of this map. On the first iteration, that rack simply didn't exist. It was basically one racks versus two racks, and I felt like the commander and one racks front in the older iteration just didn't have enough say in how to control the flow of the side fronts. So often the edge players who can harass the center strongholds were just kind of free to do that and do whatever they want because they had such an overwhelming advantage and didn't really have to defend as much. Now, this front between the two edge players feels like much more of a main front that you have to fight and contest over, as opposed to just kind of an annoyance of what it was before.
I've got to say, I feel like we got outplayed with the side lane shenanigans. These pikemen here, or maybe mostly me, I got outplayed. These pikemen, altogether, that's about 450 gold. And these infantry were about 400 early gold. But I just don't have the ability with the positioning and the gold to contest Orange's stronghold. Whereas by not building infantry here, I can't harass anymore. It's too late. The pikemen will be down there, and I'm still fighting Orange, and Orange is still putting up a good fight on the right. I can't collect things quickly enough to face the commander. So I think what Orange did, taking advantage of the early side where I can't really fight back in time, I can't really get that tempo in time, and using that early cheap infantry to harass was a brilliant idea.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. You did kind of force him to throw some resources at your commander, though. Commanders are super efficient units. Like, their reinforced cost is ridiculously low for what they are worth. And you playing aggressive and just hitting that village just kind of warranted his response to immediately his own pikes. So you got something out of it, and as well, those pikes and slower units were forced to be built in response to defend. So he isn't getting as much position here. He's kind of forced to huddle around his stronghold, whereas you have basically all this free space to play with. and all the villages near you to capture. Whereas like on the right side, comparatively, you're managing to just push in to his side of his villages, and you're going to have more or less an income advantage.
Fortunately, Dark Mercia's groove charges a little slow for what I had in mind.
Yeah, I definitely am a very aggressive player. While I like playing some of the other characters because they have cool abilities, or maybe their aesthetic is just nice, I really end up favoring the fast charge characters simply because I can charge at people and abuse my advantage to its max. Because I can just groove as soon as I kill 1 or 2 units, or even just face a bunch of combat damage for trading with my opponent.
Yeah, I think Dark Mercia, just because her groove is so slow, is more like a long-term commander than an early aggression commander, even though the power of her groove would suggest early aggression.
Yeah, definitely. She kind of feels a little lackluster in early game compared to Sigrid, who has a similar groove in that she can heal herself and, of course, cause a big dent in your opponent's army. But just the fact that she has a medium groove and Dark Mercia does not just makes all the difference there.
For my side on the right, I'm trying to decide whether or not I want to send this archer over here to defeat these pikemen like I planned and harass Black some more, or whether or not I want to pressure Orange by going after his commander. If I pressure Orange, I might be able to stop Orange from harassing my ally on the right. But if I defeat these pikemen, I can harass my enemy on the left and help my ally. There's a lot of great choices in this map.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out how I'm supposed to push forward with this giant. It's quite a thorn in my side, and this line of units that he's formed is also really pretty irritating to break here. There's a decent defensive positioning for him for sure. A lot of my units are kind of stuffed in what they can actually do and attack. There's a pretty reasonable retreat and regroup by him. Slow down my endless aggression that I just like to do.
It seems like the center of this map is very mechanics-based. While there's certainly great mechanics and decisions to be made on the side lanes, the center seems like where you'd want to put your competitive player if you only had one on your team.
I definitely didn't think too much about that, like in terms of when I was making the map myself, but it kind of just ended up that way because the center definitely is inspired more by competitive map design. Like most noticeably, if for those of you who aren't aware, there's this line of flagstone, which I've also decorated by creating like kind of a path border there, which is one of the most typical competitive map balance design features because trebuchets and ballistas are actually very powerful units, probably one of the most dominating strategies coupled with pikemen lines to create basically an impenetrable and uncontestable line that you can never trade into. And so flagstone is intraversable by all wheeled units. So I've set it up in a way where both frontal barracks cannot build any wheeled units. So wagons, ballistas, trebuchets cannot be built anywhere because they cannot be placed on any tile adjacent to the barracks. The only tile which you can actually build the only rack which you can build a siege unit from is the one furthest back. And it has exactly one path to get to the center front, which is also a tile counted movement restriction, where it will take you 2 turns due to planes taking up 2 movement units of the siege unit, where all like ballistas and trebuchets both move 6. So they will move 3 down and then 2 more before being stuck behind this village. So they will lose another tile of movement to the village being blocking the way before even being able to get close to center to actually be effective. So it's not a complete ban on wheeled units for center players here, but definitely a kind of more subtle way to make them less prominent because, well, they're just extremely powerful units, as pretty much anyone in the competitive community will tell you.
While Sikey focuses on his turn, because I'm terrible and I keep distracting him, let's talk about Trebs. If you could build Trebs out of these barracks here, there's really no reason not to. with all the forests scattered across the map slowing down the nights, and enough of these barracks that you could easily form an infantry or a pike line. Just building some trebs protected by foot soldier meat shields would give you definitive access to bombarding these center cities, preventing your opponent from taking them or even getting near them. It would also be very powerful first turn advantage because the first player would be the first one to get their treb there, and therefore the first one holding that territory. So with the slight nerf to trebs and the fact that you can really see it coming, since it takes 3 turns to even cross this village, turn 1 build, turn 2 move, turn 3, 4 turns to get across this village, it definitely gives you the ability to prepare for it. In reality, because this map is awesome, it's really going to turn into whether Valder or I can spend the right amount of resources in the right places on the map. And by committing to this early infantry harass, Valder will actually get a little bit extra money if, and only if, they can hold this city from this approaching night, and they definitely can for at least a few turns. So that infantry, I think, was well spent. I might try to use that strategy in the future. From my side over here, Dark Mercia, I'm just trying to whittle down his forces without letting Dark Mercia die. It's kind of my goal. If I can get my groove up, then I can really just move to the center of his forces and go really aggressive. But until that happens, I can't. My ultimate goal, if at all possible, is to just take one of these barracks. If I can take one of those barracks, I'll completely change the game on the left side and use all the extra money to easily destroy Valder on the right. Black will have to send troops down to try to harass and stop me, giving my partner the easy win. But that's only if I can pull it off, and given that Valder will soon have maybe a little bit more income than me, that might not be realistic. But we'll see what happens. It looks like Black broke up their Uber formation line and managed to capture one of the center properties. So this is looking pretty even in the center. What do you think, Sikey, when someone throws your map strategies back at you? Do you feel proud? Like, yes, my map creates all these awesome strategies, or like, darn it.
I'm definitely just having fun with it. Yeah, I like to see all the different ways that people have their own take on how to play my maps. It's definitely like a fun time. And as well, you get to maybe figure out a little bit of nuance that you couldn't have possibly seen as the sole, like, one play tester as you created the map before, whereas you kind of just play 4 people's turns in this case, all by your lonesome, just to see how, like, openers could potentially play out, who gets an advantage here, who gets an advantage there, is it unfair, is it too, biased towards player 1? But yeah, and by having other people play your map, you get just a whole new perspective on things, and you can definitely catch something that may be a little too strong of a strategy here or there, and maybe like will actually allow you to make a change to a map and make your map just that much better. Like, that's the whole theory of playtesting.
I will say that these properties, these 3 here on either side, they're very hard to contest, even though your opponent has double barracks first. So it means that you'll almost definitely be able to capture them. What is a good way to steal them from your opponent? Both me and Orange have started using archers for that effect.
Yeah, there's definitely that bit of nuance to the sides where basically the players on the furthest edge with their side front there, they're like definitely have a lot more control of those villages, so they can get that income there. Of course, they are still incentivized to protect them, and basically, so that's still your incentive to attack that front as opposed to maintaining a more completely defensive position at your stronghold and just harass the center player. The main thing I feel like the players with the strongholds on the edges can do is that they have a much easier time getting a siege unit into position to attack their opponent's villages and to basically control space. So right now, I'm still thinking of making a new iteration of this map, but I'm unsure of whether I want to make it harder for these players with strongholds to build siege units, such as the trebuchet or ballista here. Archers, of course, are another good use. As you can see, that 2-tile mountain between the village, and the archer is treating orange quite nicely, as he's just free to shoot it and harass you from that distance there.
Yeah, I know. That's really annoying. I don't know what to do about it. All right. Well, I'm going to move my infantry up in what might be suicidal aggression. But I just want to try to put some pressure on Orange, because he's getting another infantry ready to go. It's like that guy was positioned to either go left or right. And if he gets enough of your properties over here, not only does it hurt you, but I'll be at a huge income disadvantage as well. I really like that start. He sent 4 infantry forward. That was really powerful.
Yeah, that was definitely a really interesting take on how to use this map's concept. I really appreciated that, because I hadn't seen anyone try that before, and didn't really think to try that myself.
Well, siege units are expensive. I'll tell you, the reason I haven't made one yet is because if I make one in either front, I sacrifice the ability to make anything else in any other front. Like, I have 1,000 income right now. I could make a trebuchet, and I know it would be really strong right here. But he's got units coming in on this barracks. I have a whole other front to worry about. It's the entire reason I've delayed making one so long. I've got pikemen coming in and not enough guys to defend it. So many decisions. I think in the end I will make it. Not only because you recommended it, and this is a video of your map where I want to test all the things, but also because I feel like there's not a lot I can contribute on the left. I can't stop him from making all these skeletons. If he chooses not to fight me, the best thing I can do is take Dark Mercia in and out and just harass. So I want to win on the right. I want to kill Valder. I think if I could kill Valder, that would win us the game.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Something, that I definitely forgot to mention when talking about the map concepts, dealing with all the things that make kind of these turn-based strategy games, or tile-based turn-based strategy games, imbalanced in the sense of who goes first and who goes second, is that another thing that this map kind of auto-balances out is that siege units are too expensive, that you have too much to manage, that you have too many fronts, you have too many barracks to produce out of, that you're incentivized to do so. So it becomes just that much harder to try and build a trebuchet, even if it is strong.
I'm worried that my decision to build a trebuchet means Valder's pikemen and himself and this guy up here can just wipe out my entire front line. My treb won't do me a lot of good if it's suddenly surrounded by swarms of undead.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's see how that pans out for you.
One interesting strategy, you definitely need to coordinate with a partner for this. But since we joked about sending troops back to actually fight the pincering opponent, I wonder, could we do that? No, I'm not suggesting for this game, but could the middle player actually, like, maybe around turn 5, abandon the middle of the map and just start sending massive amounts of troops back to try to remove this player from the game? The idea being that maybe with, like, pikemen or something cheap, they could just defend these barracks long enough to take them out. Have you ever seen anyone even try that?
No, definitely not. I played with the thought a little bit through myself, but I haven't fully explored it. Of course, like, I can't really know until I literally see it in front of me, until I, like, literally try it. Then I will definitely know. I tried not to make that, like, too strong of a strategy. The way the barracks are kind of arranged for the center players and the general reinforced distance, I've tried to make that in a way where that strategy isn't going to be, like, one of your strongest openers. It's probably like something you can. I want it to be something that you can definitely take advantage if the situation calls for it, where you see that, like, okay, I have enough. Like, I don't have enough pressure. My opponent's not putting enough pressure on me in center, so now I can just try and really attack the players on towards the edge. Sure, if I really would like that to be a immediate opener of where you just try and defend from the get-go and send units towards the edge players straight away, because I believe that will be a little too oppressive. Like the edge players will have basically be forced entirely into a defensive role as opposed to the more harassment role that I'm trying to make them have. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting thought. I think the reinforced distance is pretty predominantly too far because it's just like a lot of tiles you have to walk over, though. There is like a broken road that I made that you could potentially wagon units. But once you reach to the point past your stronghold towards this formation of 4 villages, there's just, again, this big like glob of forest that will prevent your units from passing over quickly. So I think that shouldn't be too much of a problem.
It's definitely really well done. If you were even to attempt that, it would be a near-suicidal strategy, as one mistake, and your middle ally would overrun you, ending the game in the opposite direction. Incidentally, Sikey,
Yeah,
I did the
definitely.
math. Theoretically, if you roll well, you do have a win condition on their commander with Knight Knight Emmerich, but you'd have to roll
Yeah.
well, and if you lose, you lose your troops.
I'm definitely considering it. There's definitely some kind of extreme cost going on there, like cost-benefit analysis to go there. I feel like it's a bit early in the morning for that, but
If you try it and we lose, I won't complain. That's an awesome strategy.
Because there's another path that I can take that seems pretty darn good, where I basically take over center as opposed to just having to rely on killing their commander. But definitely, the Stoop here playing black has been way too aggressive with the commander. I already let him get away with it once. I'm just like considering whether I should let him get away with it again or not, and I should just take out his commander wholesale right now.
They are playing the odds. If I'm doing my math correctly, with 60, 60, 45, and a 10% reduction, the average damage you deal is 95. That means you'd have to roll slightly better than average to take it out.
You know what? There's another thing that I can do. I can attack with this mage first, which you see that I'm doing right now.
Oh my god, yeah! No, it works now!
Just,
you can do it now!
I might just always win.
Emmerich Knight Knight, I would go for it.
Oh, there's a chance that it fails! I can roll low.
You can.
If I roll, how low do I want to roll? So my mid damage is 43, yeah, and he's at 41.
But remember,
so I have to roll pretty low for him to survive this.
So they're at about half health. Plains is a 10% reduction. That's 5%. Ah, you got it. You got it. That's GG.
Yep, that is GG.
I didn't think of the alchemist. That just goes to show you, Sikey knows what he's doing.
I don't know. I've played a lot of advanced wars, so I'm used to like suiciding units in to get more attacks in. But
oh, that was brilliant. That was well deserved.
Thank you. I'm not really the best player though. There are plenty of like even lower level competitive players who are much better than me. But you know, I just like to play this game for fun. But I play it enough where it just kind of comes normal to see different lines and stuff. So I'm in this weird in-between of where I'm more of a person who likes to be good at the game, like kind of, and likes to make maps for good players, but at the same time I'm not like hardcore competitive, which is why you pretty much will never see me make symmetrical 1v1 maps that don't have like a cool or really obvious and apparent concept that is different or really interesting to me. Instead, you will see me like make maps like these where there's like a whole bunch of shenanigans going on, essentially.
See, this is why I love your maps, because I'm more of a casual player. Like, yeah, that's GG. Yeah, Orange had to surrender at that point. I love gimmicky strategies. Like, I'm starting to develop a nickname of, like, the Sneaky Dragon, because I've won every FFA game I've played so far, but always with a very sneaky dragon just outside line of sight. And I know you know how I won this map last time, with just sending knights after the stronghold.
Yeah, definitely.
So I love gimmicks. I love creative strategies. But, like, for the hardcore, like, mechanics game, I'm not that good. I think Orange really outplayed me there. Valder really had a much better strategy. That infantry thing was awesome, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. It was a great read on how the map's flow would work and how you can balance that front. That you actually don't need to commit early units to the start because the furthest edge bases both have commanders in it, so basically it's really hard to contest that. So he just went, oh, screw it, I'm not facing this commander. I'm just going to go attack the center player.
That was brilliant intuition.
Definitely am very much into the creation of maps and content creation for this game.
Well, you're definitely good at it. I remember you got featured like last week in Wargroove's official featured maps section. Maybe we should try that one next.
Yeah, maybe. I'm trying to actually redesign that map because one of the Wargroove team members, I think, Shu, who's always really active here in Discord, is now trying to get community input on what the next quick play pool is going to be. Shu actually put one of my map on the list of things that he might want to include in the quick play pool.
All right. Just to run that down for everybody listening. One of the Wargroove developers chose one of Sikey's maps. They picked it and nominated it for the new quick play pool. How awesome is that?
Yeah, it's definitely sick, and like I'd totally be honored, but I feel like in its current state, I would not be comfortable putting that map there. That map is also one of my older ones. Like it was made shortly after the first iteration of Pincer Lane. So it's one I haven't worked on for quite a long time. While I did have a longer period of working on the map in general and testing it, I played like a couple matches with it. I definitely wouldn't say it's particularly balanced. There's a high probability that there's like strategies on that map which will be and openers, which will basically lead you to an unlosable position, depending on which side you're on there.
All right, well then we definitely have something to look forward to. If you would like more videos like this where we interview the developers of maps and talk about awesome strategies and techniques, please hit that like or subscribe button. And yeah, stay tuned. Apparently Sikey has another possible quick play nomination map coming up. More videos to come. See you next time.